أما بعد. Alhamdulillah. We started a session a bit earlier concerning zakat. We're getting a bit technical into it. I figured it might be a bit more beneficial just to do some FAQs. So inshallah we'll get back to the detailed sessions later on for those who want to get a more in-depth understanding of zakat. But at least to get started so that most people can benefit easily, we will just do this FAQ, and then you can use that to also bolster your knowledge and reinforce it. So a couple of questions which have come our way on and off. So the first one, on whom is zakat obligatory? We already covered this topic in the prerequisites, more precisely dealing with the prerequisites of the person. So in order for a person to be obligatory on a person, there's 4 prerequisites which are required. So they are 1. So we will just express it as he has to be an MBA and he has to be F. So MBA is Muslim, baligh, meaning mature. So in Islam, a boy is considered mature when he has a wet dream. At that point, he becomes mature. Whether he's 12, 13 years old, in the Western world, we do not consider them mature until they're 18 years old. In Islam, he has become a man. A girl becomes a woman once she has her menstruation. So that is the beginning of their being classified as adults in Islam. Before that, they're boys, girls. After that, they're men and women. This concept of adolescence, where someone is physically a man, mentally a boy, is not something particularly Islamic. Between that, between the ages of where a child has some sense, 9 years old-ish, until the time they become mature, they're called mumayyiz, someone who is able to distinguish, but still they are not legally considered adults. They're not considered mature. They're able to distinguish between right and wrong, but they're not considered mature. Once these two phenomena happen, a girl menstruates or a boy has a wet dream, then they're considered adults. Then he must be aqil. He must be sane. The person who is insane, who does not recognize, who is not able to distinguish right from wrong, these people, so loosely speaking, the word majnoon, a person who is not sane, it's a longer definition, but we understand, we have a sense of who is sane and whether we are sane or not. So the person who is sane, he has to give zakat. And then so we have the MBA, the F is free. He is not a slave. So that's not something that really applies to us these days. But so these are the 4 prerequisites for someone who has to pay zakat. All right. Next, what is the nisab for zakat to be wajib in terms of gold and silver? All right. So in terms of silver, it comes up to approximately 600 grams. That is the approximate weight of the amount that when a person possesses that much, then they will have to give zakat. All right. So approximately plus or minus 600 grams. It's a person actually needs to be in possession of 200 dirhams. And each dirham is about 2.975 grams. So when you do that out, that gives you about 600-ish grams. So what does this give us? Well, you'll have to check up the latest values. So one website that I use, I don't know if it's the best one, but it's one that I use to get an idea, is goldprice.org. And I'm not getting any type of benefits by presenting that. It's just one of the sites that I use. Then a person, in terms of gold, so what is the nisab? A person has to own approximately 20 dinars of gold. And 20 dinars of gold will equate to about 85 grams of gold. And again, I use the same website. So when a person he has any wealth greater than these amounts, so silver 600 grams comes up to ballpark. Okay, I'm just giving you ballpark. You're gonna have to check this up. Whenever it's the time for your zakat, it's ballpark $500 Canadian. So when a person possesses $500 Canadian over and above his basic needs, then he will have to give zakat on it. Now, just for discussion, sometimes we start freaking out. Oh no, I have to give zakat. Look, zakat is 2.5%. All right. Zakat is 2.5%. Contrast that with GST TVQ, which is 15%. So we see that it's considerably greater than zakat, right? It's 6 times as much as zakat. 6 zakats would fit in GST TVQ. So this is just to get an understanding that what Allah demands from us is not much at all. It's a very fair amount. It's a very sensible amount. And if everyone were to pay what Allah has demanded from us, then poverty could be removed very easily. All right, so this was just for discussions. I give you this 15%, but really, say we take $500 and we take 2.5% of that. How much does that give us? It gives us $12.50 of zakat on $500. That's not much, my friends. That's not much. How many times are we gonna burn that? You go for a couple of French vanillas. And 4 French vanillas, you paid more than that. Zakat on $500 is less than 4 vanilles françaises. My friends, let us not be deceived by zakat. It is very easy. All right. So what type of wealth must be considered for the ownership of nisab? So when we consider the types of wealth for nisab, there's what we call in Arabic al-mal an-nami, which is growing wealth. And this is a type of wealth which has some growth in it. So you have two types of growing wealth. You have that one which is legally considered growing. So you have legally. And we've also covered this topic in a bit of detail. You can check it out in one of our other videos. Let's see, maybe I can get a link up. I'm not too familiar with YouTube. Okay, so legally, and then you have that wealth which is in reality, which is actually increasing. So in terms of legally, you have gold, you have silver, you have cash. And then in terms of actually, we talk about livestock. Because you have cows, you have goats, you have sheep, camels, you have a bunch of them. They're going to reproduce. Last year you had 20, this year you have 30, and so on and so forth. They keep on increasing. So livestock is actually increasing. Then you will have business, business goods. So business goods, hopefully you're going to make a profit out of them. You purchase commodity and then you sell it to make profit on it, to get some increase, to have some growth in it. So this is the type of actual growth that we're talking about. So all of these are to be considered. Now, when we talk about cash, then we have investments which hold a very, and I'm going to have to do a separate session on concerning investments, because these are, some of them there's a bit of a gray line in, they're not that obvious. If you invested in a commodity, it would go under actually, and if you're invested in wealth, it would go under this side. Anyways, so a person has cash, he has some pension, and even in pensions there are details, RSPs, there's details, and so on. So all of these are different types of cash that a person, money that a person might have. And when we talk about cash, we're also talking about debts or loans which are owed to him. Loans that he has given out. So there's some level of detail on that, and inshallah we will also be covering that point shortly. So a person has to consider all of these types of wealth. He has to add them up, and then based on that, he will see what his net worth is. And another point to make is that in Islam, we don't consider a so-called moral person, moral or legal person. So these are not considered. Meaning, you see, you have corporations, you have limited liability companies, so on and so forth. So they're considered a moral person or legal person, I don't remember the technical term, and they own their own wealth and so on and so forth. In Islam we don't do like that. Say that say that Ali owns 50% of ABC Inc. and his own net worth is 20,000. And ABC Inc., their net worth is 100,000. Then that means that this for Ali means that he has to add 50,000 to his net worth. So Ali's total net worth will be 70,000 because he owns half of ABC, who owns 100,000, and so 100,000 will assume that it's between commodity and monies and so on and so forth. I'm just giving you a black box, a higher level overview of it. We're not going into details. But I just wanted to make this clear that a corporation is not considered a separate entity that will have its own zakat date and so on. It will be spread out amongst the, whatever you want to call it, shareholders or whatnot. All right. So based on this, Ali will have to give 2.5%. And then again, just for discussion's sake, let's see how horrible this 2.5% is. We're running away from this 2.5%, but 70,000 and we get 2.5% out of that. That leads to $1,750. Ali wished that he could only pay $1,750 in income taxes. And we get the double whammy, federal and provincial. And all that Allah demands from us is a simple 1/40th, 2.5%. Look at that. How merciful Allah is. He doesn't demand much from us. And this, if all the rich people were to pay zakat, it would it would remove the poverty, inshallah. But we have to step up and fulfill our obligations. All right. So next question. What is the condition for zakat to become obligatory to discharge? So when do I have a person, now we have Ali, or we'll have Uthman. So you see Uthman, he, mashallah, he just started making some money in this year, in Ramadan last year. He got his first job, 5th of Ramadan. So he got his salary. And all of a sudden, so we talked about nisab already. Nisab was approximately $500. So he got his first paycheck, $1,000. So now, Uthman, he had $1,000. He held on to it for a bit. He said, my parents gave me so much, I'm gonna give them half of what I own. So he gave them half. And then, mashallah, next week came along, and then he's steadily been increasing. Then he said, let me buy a car. So he buys himself a little used car. And like this, a year passes. Actually, let's make his car a bit more of a hit to him. So he went below nisab, but slowly he got his cash back. And now, lo and behold, we're at 5th of Ramadan again. And he finds himself above nisab. So, at this point, we're not going to look at all the fluctuations that happen in between. Because just as it could have gone, he went below nisab, he might have actually, other situations could have occurred. We're going to sort of abstract this whole section out, and we're going to see that, okay, did he ever cross zero? No, he never crossed zero. He never went negative. He was always in the positive. He was always above zero. Even though he was less than nisab. But we look at this endpoint here. Endpoint. So, at the beginning and at the end of the year, was he in possession of nisab over and above his needs? If the answer is yes, then he will have to give zakat. And a person will see what he possesses on his zakat date. So now, in a slightly different turn of events, he started off. So now we'll keep the scale a bit less. So he started off. He made some money. He bought a car. He invested in something. Some money went down. But then all of a sudden, in these days of COVID-19, he invested in PPE. And now just a week before his zakat date, from where to where did he go? Now his net worth went up maybe times 10 for discussion. So started off at the beginning, at the start, he had, let's say, $1,000. Now at the end of the year, it went up, say, 10 times. So now his net worth is 10,000. And this 10 times increase only happened in the week before. Just the week before zakat date, this is when he got his 10 times increase. But the story remains the same. We just look at the endpoints. So at the start, he had 10K. Was he more than nisab? Yes, he was. In the end, was he more than nisab? Yes. So now what we're going to do, we're going to calculate 10,000, 2.5% of 10,000. And what does that give us? 10,000. It's a lot of money, right? MashaAllah, Allah keep on giving our brother Ali more and more money. So 2.5% of that equals to how much? Yeah, that's right. $250. It's not much. So this is the method in which we're going to look. It's not necessary that he possesses. It is not necessary that he possesses this wealth throughout this entire period. We look at the endpoints. The start point at the end point. At the start point, did he possess nisab? Yes. Okay. End point, did he still possess nisab? Yes. Was he always above nisab throughout this whole period? Was he always above zero throughout this whole period? Yes. Great. Then we look at what he was at the last moment, and we calculate 2.5% on that. Straightforward. All right. Okay, next question. What type of debts and how much of them could be subtracted? So, when we were talking about the types of wealth, prerequisites of wealth were 5. And so 5 prerequisites. So we've covered this topic in the prerequisites video. Check that out. But I'll just go over them briefly. So the first prerequisite is that it should be growing wealth. And we discussed growing wealth just a couple of pages back. All right. It should be over and above his basic needs. So we look at we make sure that over and above his basic needs. Then he must be in total ownership of it. Fourth is that it should be free of debt. And the last is it should be greater than nisab. All right. So we bring this topic here. I just wanted to sort of enumerate them for, just for some revision. But the topic which we're looking at here is free of debt. So normally we would look at a person's, his net worth. How much cash does he have? Say that he doesn't have any commodities. He just has money in the bank. Say that he's got 25K in the bank. And you will have to give me a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so he has 25K in the bank. And he sees what are his daily or his immediate needs. So whatever, he has maybe about $3,000 of immediate needs. So we're going to subtract this. Gives us 22K. Out of this, he is in total ownership of it. So total ownership is another topic. We've covered that in the prerequisites, so you guys can listen to it over there. Now, in terms of debt, he has some debts. Say that he is, his needs for discussion. This month, mashallah, he's driving a nice car. So he's paying $600 per month. Now, mashallah, brother got a 0% interest deal. There's no interest on his car, so it's clean, and so on. But he has $600 a month that he has to pay. So he included $600 for this month. The immediate needs, he's looking at what is due. What is due for 1 month. Because nowadays in our society, everything is done on a monthly basis. Rent is on a monthly basis. Electricity is on a monthly basis. Cars are on a monthly basis. So on and so forth. Had there been a way to quantify it in a more accurate way, it could have been done, but since everything is done on a monthly basis, so we'll just use that for discussion. Now, so $600 per month. So that means he has a $60,000 car, and he financed the entire thing at 0%. So he owes $60,000. Now, he's not going to deduct 60,000 from here. That would be a mistake. That would be wrong. He is going to deduct what he has to pay on a 1 year basis, what we call short-term loan. So he's going to do 600 times 12 minus 7,200. And then he will say, okay, 22,000 minus 7,200. Okay. And now he possesses 14. So for determination of zakat, does he pay or not? Yes, he will have to pay. Now, on what amount will he pay his zakat? Well, this was just to determine if we're going to, if we are going, if that's going to make a difference. Since it's not going to affect anything, it's not going to take him below the amount. We'll remove this from the consideration. And actually, the zakatable amount is 25,000 minus 7,200, and he will pay zakat on 17,800. All right, so now as we're talking about debts, I want you to consider two things. You have debts which are long-term. You have debts which are short-term. So there are many types of long-term debts. A person might have financed a car over 7 years at 0%. Someone might have financed a car with some percentage. If we have fallen into this haram of interest, then we should make tawbah, we should make istighfar. It is a sin, and we should recognize it as such. Even if we, for some situation, some reason or other, we have fallen into it, we should make istighfar. Do not try to justify the sin. Admit that it is, and make dua that, ask Allah's forgiveness, that Allah take us out of it. Allah take me first, and take our families and everybody out of this haram, and let us keep ourselves clean. So, whether it might be a person having a mortgage on a house, of 500,000, or on a car of 60,000. If that's the case, then even our richest people, they're not going to be paying zakat. They're going to be eligible for zakat because they're completely swamped in loans. So what our fuqaha tell us is that we look at short term, meaning what is due in 1 year. What is due in 1 year? So 12 monthly payments, or whatever a person's terms might be. If a person is being charged every 2 weeks, then 26 times bi-weekly payments. We'll see how much he has to give on that. And then he should, based on this, he would reduce. That would be considered his short-term loan. Because only 12, so like for example, of the car, 12 times $600 is going to be demanded from him this year. That makes 7,200. So this will be his short-term loan on his car. And so on for his house and whatever it might be. Only short-term loans are to be deducted from a person's net worth when paying his zakat, when calculating his zakat. not the entire amount, only that which is to be paid in short term. And short term, when we say that, we mean what is being demanded, and what is being demanded that it be paid off in a year. All right. So now, what is the nisab? Next question: what is the nisab for a recipient of zakat to be eligible to receive it? So this we talked about. The different types of wealth, and we have the detailed video concerning this, so you guys can check that out. Again, I'll try to get a link up and I'll see if it works. So when we talk about having to give zakat, then we look at a person's net worth of growing wealth. When we talk about receiving zakat, then we are talking about a person's worth for non-essentials. So these are things which are not his basic needs. But it can include other monies which are not zakatable. So here we had money, gold, silver, and so on. Now when we talk about receiving zakat, we're going to talk about other things which are going on, not his furniture for the house, or from his basic needs. His house is his basic need, his car is his basic need, but now he has he has a regular Lexus which he drives around, but parked in the basement or parked in the garage, he has his own Lambo. He says, "Oh, I have a car which I use for my need, please give me zakat." Say, well, you're driving around your Lexus, you have another car, and that, although is not zakatable wealth, but it is non-essential wealth. It is not from your basic needs. So now we're going to throw that Lambo into how much money he has as non-essentials, and we see what is the value of that. It's about 250k. We say, my brother, he's a baller. You're rich. You're not eligible to receive zakat. Sure, you might not be liquid, but you are not eligible to receive zakat. So it would not be permissible to give such a person zakat. It would not be permissible for this person to receive zakat. He is not entitled. He's not eligible for it. Rather, a person would have to find someone who might have some who doesn't have any of this. They might have furniture in the house, and they might have stuff of their basic needs, but they will not have this non-essential wealth, which is over and above the nisab. So when it comes to giving zakat, just check up with a mufti. MashaAllah, we have a couple of muftis in town. When it comes to giving, then we take the silver nisab, which is approximately $500. So a person who has over and above $500, he's going to give $12.50 in zakat. When it comes to receiving, then look for someone who has less than the gold nisab. And the gold nisab, plus or minus, is approximately 6,000. So someone who has less than 6,000, there would be scope to give them zakat. Of course, due diligence has to be done. You have to see that this person is actually entitled to receive zakat. Because if it comes to less than $500, you might find someone, and these people would be even more deserving of receiving zakat than anyone else. The people who don't even have $500, but having less than $6,000 is also a possibility. So do check up with your muftis before this. Alright, who are the categories of people eligible to receive zakat? Okay, so there are 8 types of people who have been mentioned in Quran. There are 8 types of people who have been mentioned in Quran. And so let's tell it to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Tawbah, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. That sadaqat, meaning here sadaqat is referring to zakat, are meant only to be given to the poor, the needy, those employed to collect them, to those whose hearts are to be won in the cause of the slaves, and those encumbered with debt in the way of Allah, and to a wayfarer. This is an obligation prescribed by Allah. Allah is all-knowing and wise. So 8 types of people have been described. So the first one is the poor person. And he is a person who owns less than nisab. So paying zakat to a person owning less than the nisab is permissible, even though this person might be healthy and capable of earning. Then the second type of person is the destitute. And from destitute, we mean by a person who owns nothing at all. Then the zakat wal-amilina alayha zakat collector. This was someone who the Amir would appoint to do the job, and he would free himself up from his other duties, and he would go and he would collect. So based on his necessity and so on, and with the amount of work he has done, he would be given from the zakat. Today, it's mentioned in the Quran, so there's scope for it, but there's some level of discussion on it. Then, for وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Now, this is one that those whose hearts are to be won. Initially, it meant the new Muslims who were helped in becoming more firm through the generosity of Islam. And then, at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, and this is a point to be understood, he said if Islam enjoys supremacy and influence, then there is no need to pay zakat to those whose hearts are to be won. At the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, he said that this is no longer the case. We do not need to give zakat to such people because Islam has become well known and established, and the need is no longer there. So all the Sahaba, they agreed upon it. It was a point which was agreed upon. No one raised any objections. So just as if today all the ulama of the world were to get together and were to be in agreement upon a point, we'd be like, hey, all the scholars have said so. That doesn't really give me too much room to talk. So at the time of Sahaba, at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, he mentioned this, and no Sahaba, objected to it. They were all in agreement with it. So this is ijma' of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. This holds a very strong weight. In establishing law, this holds a very, very strong weight. We'll not say that this part of the ayah is abrogated, but it holds a very strong weight. So we do not give for al-mu'allafati qulubuhum. If the conditions will present themselves, then the story might be different. But for now, we do not give to this particular masraf, this particular path of expenditure. Sorry, those who's are to be won, but we don't give here. Then fifth is the slaves. So there's a bigger discussion on this. There were different types of slaves that were present during that time, and each had their own types of rules. So there's the mukatab, who has taken on a contract with his master, that I'm going to give you so much money by such and such time to buy my freedom, and the master lets him work and earns his money, on his free time and so on, to buy his freedom. So Deen, Islam seeks to elevate the people and to take them out of the slavery. So Allah has facilitated such that if, in the time now, it's, slaves walking around in Canada. But at the time, if there was such a person, such a mukatab, then one could give their zakat money to such a slave so that he could buy his freedom. So we're talking about mukatab. Then the sixth type, the indebted, wal gharimin. So the person upon whom paying back his debt no more remains the owner of his nisab. So a person, he has so much debt that all his net worth, now we're not talking just about zakatable wealth, we're talking about all wealth that he possesses. His debts are so big that his debts would finish off all types of monies that he has. So let's say he has ownership of 20k, and he has, so this is of cash, he has 10k worth of luxury items, so to speak, but he has debts which are of 100k. So now this person finds himself indebted. So it is permissible to give such a person. Now again, we take a look at what is owed on an immediate basis. Otherwise, all the rich people of the world would be eligible for zakat because they all have huge debts. They buy factories and they buy Bugattis on credit. Say, I have to pay 1 million back for my Bugatti, and my Bugatti is my main car, so let's not take that into calculation, into consideration. So I have 10,000 in the bank, and I have a debt of $1 million, so I'm eligible for zakat. Get out of here, man. They look at what's due on him immediately or in the short term. Then 7, fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah. For this one, there's some level of discussion. So the wording seems pretty general, but it has always been applied to either those people who were striving in the path of Allah, the mujahideen at that time, and specifically the poor mujahideen, or it was referring to those hajis, those people going for the pilgrimage who did not have the means to come back. Their wealth got exhausted, it was finished, and they could not come back. Zakat could be used for such people. Today there are some people that just look at the word without actually going into the fiqh of it and seeing how the initial generations had understood it. They say, fi sabilillah, please send your zakat to our YouTube channel. Please send zakat, for my television channel. Allah says fi sabilillah, you can send. So this is fi sabilillah too. This is not fi sabilillah. Actually, if you want to talk about fi sabilillah, so generally, then all of these modes of spending zakat are fi sabilillah. To give money to the poor, this is fi sabilillah already. To give, والفقراء والمساكين, this is fi sabilillah. والعاملين عليها في سبيل الله. وفي الرقاب والغارمين. This is all fi sabilillah. Then what is the point of bringing fi sabilillah again? Because when fi sabilillah is mentioned, then in a very specific meaning is mentioned. And that is now, by the consensus and by from our understanding of our scholars, that it is those hujjaj, those pilgrims who have gone for the hajj and who find that their means have been cut off and they do not have money to come back. This is the fi sabilillah that we're talking about. It's not talking about funding a channel or building a masjid or building a this or a that. No, it's talking about people, and specifically hajjis. And the last is the traveler, nisabil. So he's a traveler who has enough wealth in his home city. Now this is, it's kind of complicated these days because everybody has access to their things electronically. A person might be a baller back home and then he's traveling to some place and that he doesn't have money. Okay, look, so it was initially meant for a person who is a traveler who has enough money back home but has run out of money during the current journey. Zakat may be paid to him, given to him, so that he is able to reach his home city. So if that's actually the case of somebody that he's in some place that he doesn't have access to his money, then yeah, Ibn Sabil is still, and if he has access to his money, then there's no scope for him. Right? Now, do we have to give? We can give to any one of these 8. You can, okay, 4 has been removed because of the rationale that I talked to you about. So there remain 7. So zakat can be given to any of these 7. Zakat can be given to any of these 7 types. It doesn't have to be given to every single one of them. Rather, a person can give the entire amount to just one of these types. He can give it to just one of these types. He doesn't have to give it to all 7 of them. There's some difference of opinion amongst the Shafi'i school of thought. They're of the opinion that every one of these types should be given to. We are, according to the Hanafi school of thought, we say that whichever one you give to, your zakat will be discharged, will be done. And a person, even if others say that 6 types are present, but he decides to give his whole zakat just to one type, then even then his zakat will be considered discharged. Okay. So now, how much should be given, and what category is better to give? All right. So how much should be given? A person can give. It's just like that someone gives to a single person. He gives to person A. He gives him such an amount, he gives him X amount, which causes him to be above nisab. So now that puts person A in such a position that if he maintains his money over a year, he would have to be giving zakat. So it's just like it's preferable that one person does not give that much. Rather, he should look out for others. But even though he can, there'd be some amount of dislike in that, but it would still be considered discharged. So that's one thing. Now, which category is best to give to? It is ideal to give, if a person gives to someone who is indebted, let's go for that. Chances are if he's indebted, he will not have much liquid cash, much liquid assets lying around. So you have, in order of how much a person owns, you have the fuqara, which is the first category that Allah mentions. Someone who has more than 0 and he has less than nisab. You have the masakin. This person actually has 0. And you have al-gharimin. And this person, due to his debt, this person actually has less than 0. So ideally, help the gharimin, and then so on and so forth. So this is from one aspect. This is from one angle. All right. Now from the next angle, so we looked at angle 1. Now from angle 2, okay. Okay, so from angle 2, we're talking about family members. Family members. So it is best to give someone, of one's own family members. That's preferable, rather than to give someone who is outside. So there's some restrictions with who is included in family members. It's not for everybody. But family members like cousins, like brothers, and so on, there's scope to give to these family members. So it's preferable to give to family members than, that's the highest priority. Second is neighbors. And then lastly after that, it's, anybody else. So that's the next aspect. And then the third aspect is local versus overseas. Overseas, loosely speaking, someone who is quite a distance away. So when we talk about someone who is quite a distance away, It doesn't necessarily have to be in India, Pakistan. It might be someone who's, a bit further away in the US or in Mexico or so on and so forth. There's all sorts of discussions. But local is given preference. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke to Muaz ibn Jabal about the people, and going to Yemen, he said that zakat should be taken from their rich and given to their poor. Should be taken from their rich and given to their poor. So this would be an aspect that it should not be, if there are people who are needy in the vicinity of the place where zakat is being taken out, then these are the people who should ideally be the recipients. It is disliked that it should be going from one city to another, or from one place to another. But if, on the other hand, if far away we have family, we have, I have my long lost cousin, and who's living in Australia, and he's poor. So now I can either give it to somebody close by, or I can send it to my long lost cousin who's living in Australia. Then there is an argument to be made to give it for my cousin who's living in Australia, because there are the ties of kinship. But normally, if these ties of kinship do not exist, then the preference is to give zakat locally versus giving it at a distance. Next, a list of people, avenues that are not allowed to receive one's zakat. All right, so let's okay. There's a couple of types of people. First, non-Muslims. Look, if we have some non-Muslim neighbors and so on who are in need, they're not eligible for zakat. Take care of them through nafil sadaqah. I'm not saying don't help them. I'm saying that zakat cannot be used for that. You can help them out through nafil sadaqah, through other things, but not through zakat. So non-Muslims are not eligible to receive zakat. Then rich people are not eligible to receive zakat. Now, when we talk about a rich person, then we are talking about an adult. A person who is a rich adult. Now, if this rich adult, he has a child, the child is under the responsibility of the adult. So I cannot give it to the child of the rich adult, because he is under the care of this adult who is rich. So it's like giving it to the rich person, and that is not a place where I can spend zakat. So same way, I cannot give it to a rich child. Say that the kid himself has a lot of money. There are some children who are possessors of great wealth. They have money in the bank, they're just not too sensible, and they don't have access to it, but they're rich, they have plenty of money. So we cannot give zakat to such a child either. Then there's Banu Hashim, the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look, the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're to be honored. Zakat is to remove the dirt from our wealth. Like I mentioned, zakka yuzakki tazkiyatan wa zakatan means to take a fire and to burn the impurities out of something. So a person who is giving zakat, he is removing the filth, he is removing the dirt from his wealth, and he's taking it away. So a person, he gives it to the poor and the needy, that's fine. But the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Banu Hashim, so we're talking about the children of Ali radiallahu anhu, and the children of Abbas and so on, and so there's some details in it. But basically, as we express it, we're talking about the Sayyids or the Sharifs, the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are not allowed to give them zakat. We should give them a hadiyah. We should give them a gift. We should honor them. We should not give them the filth of our money. And then there are the zakat persons. So the person paying zakat, for him, he has his parents. So they're not eligible for his zakat. He should be taking care of them anyways. So they're not eligible. You have his children. He's already supposed to be taking care of them. So he's not to give them zakat. There is his spouse. She is already, or he is already, their responsibility. So it is not permissible to give zakat to them. Nafil sadaqah can be given, but zakat cannot be given. So a pair cannot give his parents or his ancestors. He cannot give his children or their offspring, and he cannot give it to his spouse either. And the last thing is that he cannot give it, he cannot spend it on an institution. He cannot spend it on an institution. He has to be, he has to transfer the ownership to a person. He must be transferring the ownership of the zakat to a person. So if he is, if he's giving it to a masjid, there's no one in particular who is gaining ownership of this wealth. He has not made transfer. He's not made tamlik to a person. He has not transferred ownership to a person. He's given it to an institution. Likewise, he can't give it to building a well, because no one is, who is the owner of that well. If he buys the well, he pays someone and then he transfers ownership of the well to a family, then that's fine. If he builds a masjid and he transfers ownership, there's a bit more details into that. But if he transfers the wealth over to somebody, there's scope in it. But if he is just having the money spent to build an institution, that will not work. To build a masjid, it will not work. To pay for the expenses in a madrasa, that will not work. He has to transfer the ownership to someone who is eligible. And we mentioned already who are the people that are eligible. So that was a bit of a discussion on who is not eligible to receive zakat. And in the same way, just as an institution is not allowed to receive zakat, likewise for a TV channel, it is not permissible. For a YouTube channel, it is not permissible. To have material printed, dawah material, it is not permissible. To a masjid or a madrasa, these are not permissible. So now you see sometimes some people, they do spend money. They do, some madaris are ready to accept zakat. What are they in fact doing? They're giving it to poor students. they're collecting the money, but they in fact are not using it for their own building. They're handing it off to poor students, or they're handing it off to some poor person in the locality. Now sometimes this person in the locality, he will give some amount of money back to the madrasa. That's possible. So that's a thing which could happen. But when the madaris do it, then generally they know that it has to go to a person. They're not going to pocket it and run. They're going to hand it off to a person through which the process of zakat can be duly completed, and they will give it to someone who is eligible to receive it. And through these other things, institutions, TV channels, YouTube channels, dawah material, printing material, and so on. This is not, if a person, he prints out material and he hands this material to someone, he prints out a bunch of books, and now this person, they give books to a poor person. Okay, books have some sort of a financial value, so you've transferred over the financial value of these books. Okay, there's some level of scope in it. But unless that is what is actually what's happening, is something to be avoided. So that's sort of going, borderline taking loopholes. Now a person can't cheat Allah. We can say in the system today that we did this and we did that and it was permissible, but that doesn't really fly with Allah. And the thing is, we have to answer Allah on the Day of Judgment. So zakat is obligatory on debts to be received. Okay. So what kind of debts? So we talked about earlier the debts a person incurs. He has to pay zakat on them. So earlier when we were talking about the conditions for the wealth, prerequisites for the wealth, then one of them, which I just briefly touched upon, was that he has to be in total ownership of it. Total ownership, complete ownership, however you want to call it. This means that he must be in possession, and it must belong to him. So these two things are included in total possession. So for example, in a situation where someone he gave something as insecurity. Insecurity as a collateral of something. He pawned it, however you want to describe it. So I go to a pawn shop, I say, I have this beautiful set of shoes, the newest Jordans around, and I need $100. So he says, okay, I'm going to hold on to it for 2 months, and then you bring me back my $100. If you don't bring me back the $100, then I want to sell it. So I got my Jordans. Do I possess them? Do they belong to me? Yes, they belong to me. But am I in possession of them? No, I'm not in possession of them. So the ownership is not complete. So the same type of situation arises when we have a debt. We have debts receivable. We have loaned money out. So Mr. A loaned 10K to Mr. B. So this is a loan from Mr. A to Mr. B. So this 10K, does it belong to Mr. A? It belongs to him. Is he in possession of it? He is not in possession of it. So now there's different types of strengths of debts. And they're sort of treated slightly differently. Okay. So a person who has a debt that is for, someone gave someone, he gave him money, he gave him something to buy some business merchandise, and so on. Now, this type of thing, he expects this money to come back. He has a realistic expectation that money will come back. So this person, he will calculate on a yearly basis. He will calculate that, okay, in year 1, I was supposed to pay zakat on 10K. Year 2, I was supposed to pay zakat on 10K. And then what does this amount to? This amounts to $250, right? And again, $250. And then third year, on 10K, I should have been paying another $250. So all of these things, this is how much he has to pay over the period. And he's just calculating it. He's not actually paying it yet. Now in the 4th year, he gets the whole amount back. So the 10K goes to 0. At this point, now he has to do 250 in addition to the 3 years. So this year he will pay he will backdate, or he will give whatever he had calculated for those X years in the past. He will pay $1,000 of zakat this year. So now he has a choice that if he's honestly expecting his money to come, then he can pay it in year 1. He can give $250. In year 2, he can give off his $250. In year 3, he can give off his $250. So that in year 4, he only has to give $250. But if he did not do that, then the next scenario is that he can hold on to it, waiting for the entire thing for his money to come back. Then he'll have to do the entire amount, which was supposed to have been done over the years. So this is one type of debt. Now, especially as we're getting into COVID times and things are uncertain, when a person has bad debt, there's bad debt, meaning that he has a pretty serious expectation that he's not going to get the money back. Mr. A gave Mr. B 10K. Mr. B declared bankruptcy. Mr. A knows that, okay, what am I supposed to do? So the 10K is not going anywhere. I don't expect it. I should know better. It's not coming. So now he stops calculating. He says, you know what? This 10K is gone. It's finished. So first year, he was thinking that 10K would come, but Mr. B went bankrupt. So he's like, you know what? This doesn't exist. There's no zakat. 2, nothing, no zakat. 3, nothing, no zakat. Now year 4, Mr. B all of a sudden becomes a baller. He gets some money. So he returns the 10K to Mr. A. Now Mr. A says, wow, you know what? I wasn't expecting this. You had declared bankruptcy. You wouldn't even have to give it back. Mr. B says, maybe in the world I didn't have to give it back, but I want to clear my accounts for the akhirah. So he gives him back his 10K. So Mr. B so now Mr. A, having received his 10K, he is not going to backdate. He will just pay zakat for this one time. He will pay zakat once. That's all he needs to do. And thus, that is the questions that we had so far. So inshallah, hopefully that's helpful. And I'm going to put the different indexes in the video so that it makes it easier for you guys to run through them. Inshallah, Allah give us tawfiq to discharge this obligation which is on us with joy, happily, recognizing that it's not a burden, but it's actually a means of increasing and purifying our wealth, and it is our honor that Allah accept it from us. So may Allah accept it from us. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.